بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا، وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. لله تبارك وتعالى. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله تعالى وبركاته. I praise Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. I thank Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala. I ask Allah to send countless blessings and salutations upon our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all those who follow them in excellence until the day of judgment. And I ask Allah tabaraka wa ta'ala to grant us sincere intentions. I remind myself and I remind you with what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, when he told him that if Allah guides by way of you one person, it is better for you than the red camel. And there is another narration, it is better for you than the world and everything it contains. Each and every one of us have the opportunity in our day and time to earn the reward that is mentioned in this hadith. Because all of us, we have these devices, we have access to these social media platforms, and it would be wise of us to use them to make an effort to guide someone to the straight path, the path of al-Islam. And don't minimize that one person that you may reach. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam told us that often a person who carries al-fiqh, the knowledge, the understanding of the religion, would convey that to someone who is much more knowledgeable and has a better understanding than them. He said, فَرُبَّ حَامِلِ فِقْهٍ إِلَى مَنْ هُوَ أَفْقَهُ مِنْهُ. How many times you have a person who actually is bearing the understanding of the deen. They've received it, but they convey it to someone who can do much more with it than they can. They understand it better. They can convey it better. So there is always room for us to earn immense reward in conveying knowledge, right? And that's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned to convey from me, even if it is one saying, just a portion of the knowledge is beneficial, and each and every one of us should get our share of that. And for the one who says, and all of us should be the one who says, I don't have sufficient knowledge. All of us are like that. Imam al-Haddad radiallahu ta'ala anhu said something beautiful about such a person. He said, whoever knows one religious judgment, that person knows one religious judgment, then he is a learned person in that judgment, right? Whoever knows one religious judgment, then that person is learned. If you wanted to say literally, that person is a scholar in that judgment, which means he has the responsibility to convey it to others. And why is this important? Because it may be the case, and I personally believe it is the case, that the reforms, the revival that is needed specifically in our Muslim communities here in America is going to come from the grassroots. It's not going to come from the elite class. The elite class is going to maintain status quo. They're not going to reform anything. It is the ones who have been denied access, who have been treated unjustly in terms of fair distribution of knowledge and resources. It is going to be them, once they wake up, who are going to make the necessary reforms and revive the religious sciences in their communities. I firmly believe that. It is my honest belief. From experience, I believe that once we take learning serious and we actually learn, even one case and multiple cases, multiple religious judgments, collectively, we will force a change within the status quo. I honestly believe that. And it is a mission that the Black Imams Roundtable is dedicated to. Reviving the knowledge of the religion and the religious sciences in the underserved communities. That's our mission. And once that's done, the whole picture will look different. But that doesn't mean we're going to live to see it. Actually, I think we're just planting the seeds. I don't really believe the real change we're going to live to see, which really is a test of our sincerity. How sincere are you? You're not going to see the result of most of your work. Are you still going to work at maximum capacity despite the fact that you might not see the result of your work? And do you have the courage and the high aspiration to actually do it? Because it is needed. And yesterday, on the Black Imams Roundtable, we continued our series of discussions about when the rubber meets the road in terms of our Islamic sciences. So we talked about al-aqidah, and yesterday we continued and talked about al-fiqh. I want to briefly, and very briefly, I didn't want this to go over 30 minutes, so I'm going to be very brief. I want us to fully understand some concepts. So I'm going to concentrate on two concepts that I want us to understand in relation to al-fiqh. I want to make sure we understand it. No parroting. I really, really want us to understand the concepts. Whenever you talk about fiqh, you're actually talking about, as we mentioned yesterday, the practical legal rulings in Islam. The practical legal rulings in Islam. That's what we're talking about. They are those religious judgments and rules that we actually practice. That's al-fiqh. It's in our acts of worship, like purification, prayer, the obligatory charity that we must spend of our wealth, the obligatory fasting, the pilgrimage, these acts of worship, dealings, buying and selling, and lending, and safekeeping, and authorizing, all of these types of things, family issues, marriage, divorce, child custody, also like inheritance, and actual crimes and punishment. That whole body of knowledge called the Ilm al-Fiqh, the science of jurisprudence, deals with the practical religious legal judgments and rules. That's what we're talking about. Whenever we talk about that, in terms of qualifications, we're going to have two concepts in terms of qualifications related to those legal rulings. We're going to have the concept of al-ijtihad and the concept of at-taqlid. These two concepts are extremely important when we're talking in terms of qualifications, right? So in other words, the person is either going to be qualified, and there are levels of qualifications in terms of what the one person is qualified to do, or the person is not qualified and there are obligations which that person must do. And these lines for us cannot be blurred. There are qualified people and there are unqualified people. And both categories of people have responsibilities, things that they have to do because of their qualifications. So let's take the first concept that we need to understand. Al-ijtihad. What is it? Let's put it on the most basic level we can. Al-ijtihad is the qualified deduction of legal rulings and judgments from the Islamic primary text of the Quran and Sunnah when they're not explicit to the extent that only one meaning would be understood from them. That is ijtihad in its most simple form. It is the qualified person extracting legal judgments from the text of the Quran and Sunnah, meaning the verses of the Quran and the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, when there is no explicit text that can only bear one meaning. That's that function. So what should be ruled out? If this text bears only one meaning and it cannot have other possible interpretations, there is no ijtihad there. There's no textual, legal, expert opinion or extraction or deduction when the text of the Quran, meaning the verse of the Quran, that relates to legal rulings, or the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that relates to legal rulings, when they are explicit and cannot bear more than one meaning, there is no room for ijtihad in that. This is very important to understand. And in that definition, in that explanation, it's already understood that the one who is doing that knows the difference between the text that cannot bear more than one meaning and the text that can have multiple meanings that can be extracted from it in terms of legal judgments. And it also assumes that that person knows which verses and which hadiths pertain to legal judgments. This is extremely important. So that's one group of people or one class. The second is at-taqlid. What is at-taqlid? It is the unqualified person who is not able to independently extract legal judgments from the primary text of the Quran and Sunnah. Hence, they have the obligation of following the qualified person who has that ability. That's taqlid. So we can say imitation. We can say that that person who does not have the qualifications to extract legal judgments is in a position where they have to worship they have to have a life. So all the rulings, the legal rulings of the sacred law, they have to adhere to, but the question is how. So the how is going to be either you do it yourself because you have the ability and the qualifications to do it, or you follow someone else who has that ability and qualifications when you don't. That's simple. Which is an actual Quranic concept. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلِ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the person, or the people of knowledge when you don't know. That means you have that obligation. I don't know, I have to ask. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he told us that the cure to ignorance, to not understanding, is to ask. Right? So the questions and seeking knowledge is going to be the responsibility of the one who doesn't know. This is common sense, but we just need to put it in the context of the sacred law. It's common sense that the person who doesn't know cannot do something. That means they have to have someone who can show them how to do it, or who can do it for them. We live our lives like that. It is no different in the sacred law. The one who is able to do that textual deduction, those extracting of legal judgments, is called a mujtahid. So the mujtahid is the one who has that ability. He has the ability to do ijtihad, to go to the text of the Quran and Sunnah, to know which verses in hadith, where the legal judgments are, to know which of those legal judgments are explicit and only bear one meaning. Therefore, there's no opportunity to do textual deduction. And the other one, which verses or hadith can bear multiple meanings, and how do I extract from those hadith the correct meaning to actually practice the religion in a qualified manner. Simple. So that's the mujtahid. And like everything in any field of expertise, there are levels and degrees of expertise. So the mujtahid and the one who is capable of doing al-ijtihad has levels. They're not all the same. Some are at a higher level of expertise, some are at a medium level of expertise, and some are at a lower level of expertise, even though they're all experts. This is very important. They are qualified legal jurists. They actually are qualified. But their level of expertise varies between them. Then the next class is those people who are called, or who are a mukallid. The mukallid is the one who has to practice a taqleed. In other words, they have to imitate the one who has that ability, and that person is trustworthy and has the expertise. They follow them while they're learning the rules of the religion, and maybe if it is by the divine success of Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala, that person may reach the level, even the lowest levels of expertise, where they can then begin the process of extracting legal rulings by themselves. Is this clear for all of us? Let's stop right there. What I mentioned, those two categories, is it clear for us? I'll give you a chance. If you didn't understand it well, please let me clarify it. So in this context, and I was thinking about this morning, we need to be specific who we're talking to. In this issue, in this particular issue, we're talking to every single person we know. In this issue, we're talking in our time, especially whoever would be listening to this, we're actually talking to every single one of us. It applies to all of us, no exception. Every single one of us. This discussion applies to us. And every single one of us are of the category of people who are obligated to practice a taqleed. Not a one of us are at the level of al-ijtihad. Is that part clear? And then when I say ijtihad, I'm talking about at the various levels. Even the lowest level, the vast majority of imams and sheikhs are not at that level. So I want to be clear. The vast majority in the world, I'm not talking about just in America, in the world, the vast majority of scholars, imams, sheikhs are not at the beginner level of ijtihad. In reality, I'm not talking about claims, I'm talking about reality. So the vast majority of us are at that level of taqleed. And just like we said, the levels of ijtihad are levels of expertise. Likewise, the levels of taqleed are at higher and lower levels. You have very low level, the layman who doesn't know much. And then you have the common person, layman, who has the beginning tools to start the process of engaging in aspects of ijtihad. It's at a high level. Still mukallid, still have to follow someone else, but they're at a level where they can start to understand what the mujtahid does. This is extremely important to understand. Hence, whenever you see someone making the claim to independently perform ijtihad, even if they don't use the words, but they're doing the work of the mujtahid, we should know this person is a criminal. Honestly, the person is a criminal. And in reality, that criminal is really doing taqleed, but not telling you, because you're not really critically thinking about that person's case, their affair. When you really examine their affair critically, you'll realize that that person is a muqallid, and it is just which person that they're imitating, does that person actually meet the qualified or the conditions and qualifications of a true legal expert? That becomes the question, if you understand what I mean. So when you examine the one who is, even if that person doesn't say, I'm able to do ijtihad, but the result of their practice and the way they approach legal rulings is as if they are a mujtahid, even though they don't make the claim. When you examine their case truly, you will notice that they are muqallid, but not a muqallid of a true qualified legal expert, rather a novice just like themselves at a higher level of taqleed. If you understand my point. So the question becomes, who are those qualified people? And what is needed for such a person to be qualified? That we will delay to tomorrow because I have to go today. So I wanted to get that point, and I'm going to put a pin in it right there. The next time we talk, who are these qualified legal experts? And what are those necessary qualifications, in brief, that makes them legal experts? And how do we distinguish between the two? So for us, now we're talking real scholarship. Every imam in the United States of America is muqallid. Don't be fooled. Do you have that? Could y'all put that up? I'm being every single imam in the United States of America, this is where we at, especially in our communities, is a muqallid of somebody. They're not doing independent legal deductions. Even if in their fantasy mind, that's what they're doing, in reality, after critical thinking and critical thought, rather, that's not the case. So once we establish that, right? Once we establish that fact, we can approach this matter in another way. And this is something that's going to help us revive the study of the religious sciences. And when I say the USA, because that's the context we're in, we can broaden that and go around the world. Most of the people, I would say 95%, are muqallid. If there is a 5% of people walking around that are actually qualified mujtahids, I don't know who's claiming that. And if they are claiming it, I don't know who's accepting that claim. I'm not saying in issues, I'm talking about absolute. And the Muslims have never accepted that claim from nobody anyway for hundreds of years. So for someone, I would hope no one's making that claim, but I'm quite sure there is. This is the world we live in. But the Muslim nation has never accepted such a claim at all. And there's a justifiable reason why not to accept such a claim. But that's for another discussion. Inshallah, let me answer these two questions and I have to go. But is there a pun on the word? No, no. How is this phrase knowing to be understood? You actually know it. You're not guessing. Like you know that prayer is an obligation. The 5 prayers throughout the day and night are a obligation in Islam for the one who is morally responsible without an excuse. That's a legal judgment. You know that. Okay, you know that judgment. That's one judgment, right? The 5 prayers, daily prayers, are obligatory on the one who is morally responsible and does not have a legal excuse. That's a legal ruling, right? If you know that ruling, in that ruling, to that extent, you are learned and you can convey that ruling. Is that clear? You know, fasting in the month of Ramadan is an obligation for the morally responsible person who does not have a valid legal excuse. That's a ruling. That's a legal ruling. You know, fornication and adultery is unlawful by scholarly consensus. That's a legal ruling, right? Do you follow? See how many legal rulings you know? Eating pork is unlawful. That's a legal ruling. You know that ruling. You must make ablution before you can pray when water is available. That's a legal ruling. You got my point? And we could go on. And you know a lot of legal rulings. But when you know them and you understand them, then you can convey them. Right? You don't have to be Sheikh al-Islam. You just need to know the legal ruling is correct. Right? And you can get those legal rulings, which all of us do, by way of taqleed. You didn't actually extract the legal ruling yourself. Someone did that for you. But you understand it. And sometimes you can know the evidence for those legal rulings. So that's what is meant there. It's not like a mysterious thing. Is there different levels and degrees to ijtihad? Of course, and I mentioned that earlier. There are the high levels, absolute ijtihad, in every single legal ruling in all areas of law. That's absolute. There are in cases, there are in certain methodologies, there's different levels, right? And legal scholars are at various degrees in terms of that. But for us, we're not none of that. So let's be honest, right? So all of us have to follow somebody. The question is who? Not one of us are free from imitating someone else. Now, the question is, who are you imitating? Once we establish that we all muqallid, now who are you making taqleed of? That's the question, and why? And that will be taking place maybe tomorrow or the next day. Barakallahu bikum wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Inshallah, tabaraka wa ta'ala, we will be coming on sometimes throughout the day. We're going to be moving to like 2 sessions a day. But the second session, we haven't established times for yet. So set your notifications. We'll try to announce it maybe 15 minutes before we go. We'll put out some kind of notification. But just set your notifications for Masjid Muhammad of Atlantic City, YouTube, or Facebook, inshallah, and we'll do it. Barakallahu bikum wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.